Welcome to this month's Voyage Fromage. My name is Julia. I'm the owner of Formaggio Kitchen. Happy to see familiar faces here. I know a lot of folks are going to be watching this recording over the weekend, so we will get started right away. Today's theme, everybody has all their cheeses out, I'm assuming. Okay, great, thumbs up. We are, just so that you have them in the proper order, I'll let you know now what we're doing. We're going to start with Beaufort d'Alpage. Next up is going to be Cantal Entre Deux. Next up is going to be Vache d'Auvergne. And then last but not least is going to be Masterazzo. So we're in business. All right, so I am kind of going to flip things on its head today and start talking with the condiments, because the condiments that we have today, that we're sharing today, are completely exclusive to Formaggio Kitchen in the United States. So first off, we have this wonderful tartine. And so if you're familiar with what a tartine is, this is from Rue Traverset. I found Rue Traverset. I was able to visit, I really wanted to visit Provence, my first year of owning Formaggio Kitchen, because we have some beekeepers there, Le Brusque. It's a family that sells honey and tends to bees. And I really wanted to finally meet them in person after all these years. But of course, I traveled a lot, all around Provence looking for products. And one product that I came across in that area is Rue Traverset. And so they work all with local farms to collect the vegetables and fruits that they use in their conserves. And back to the name of this. So this is the second order we've ever received from them. And this is a new product that I brought in on this order because I have been obsessed lately with open face sandwiches. I don't know. I'm going to say it's fancy, but you could also say that it's kind of lazy. But if you have the right ingredients, it's the best thing ever. You've got to have great bread, and it's just a slice of crusty bread. The tartines are regionally themed. So this one is a Basque theme. So it's got the classic flavors of the Basque area of France, which is a little bit of pimenta spilette. It's very tomato based. So you put that on the bread, and then I usually add some sort of cheese, whether it's a soft, fresh goat cheese or, hi Beth, or a soft goat cheese, or using a vegetable peeler with something like the Masterazzo would be great on it. And you can eat it just room temperature, or you can have it heated up. Traditionally, you would sort of toast it open faced and get everything nice and toasty. But again, I think it's such a great representation of the region, and they use such beautiful local ingredients. So nice and tasty. And I also love savory condiments with cheeses. I think a lot of people default to sweet, and you don't have to, it doesn't always have to be sort of stereotypical sweet. When you taste this and close your eyes, it has a lot of sweetness from the tomatoes and the peppers. And that is just a different type of sweetness that goes really, really wonderfully with the cheeses. So I hope you love that. I got a good review from Michael and Ellen. Great. Awesome. I love this. I'm glad you like it. And they're the sweetest people. And that just makes it so much more fun to bring in their product. So that is the Rue Traverset, and that can go with any of these. Really, it's very versatile. All of these cheeses, none of them are so pronouncedly pungent or funky that they are not going to play nicely with this as a pairing. And then next, you have your cracker for the evening, and that's the Tiroli. Now, Tirali are, I'll pull one out, these little curly Q crackers that are very well known in Italy. These are made in the far south of Italy. Oh, there are a lot of producers of Tirali. Tirali is something you can find in the United States at, I wouldn't say like it's super common, but it's not uncommon at Italian grocers or specialty grocers. This Tirali, on the other hand, is unmatched, in my opinion. We're the only importers in the US of this. It is made in a tiny corner at the very, very south of Italy, not quite to Sicily, but pretty darn close. And what I love about it is when you bite into it, it's the flakiness. You get an incredible flakiness, but there's no butter in it. The flakiness comes from olive oil. So they make it with olive oil and white wine, but then also very, very fine flour. And that's why you get such a beautiful little cracker. And if you've taken any Voyage Fromage classes with me before, I'm kind of a purist. I kind of like the cracker to be the palate cleanser rather than the vehicle for the cheese. And that's only in sort of like a formal tasting setting. If I'm just noshing on cheese and crackers, then there's no rules. But these are such a delightful little palate cleanser to eat between the cheeses. But then also, if you get we don't have any goopy, gloppy cheeses this month. We will next month. This is a good dipper, a really, really, really good dipper. So two really, really special accompaniments that I wanted to go over tonight. Both go wonderfully with everything. Excuse me. Okay, so we are going to start with probably one of the rarest cheeses of the bunch, which is Beaufort del Page. And this cheese has a very rich history and a very rich history at our shop. But one thing I always like to clarify is that there are actually 3 different types of Beaufort in the world. So you have plain Beaufort. So if you go to a shop and you see something that says Beaufort, that is just what it is. It is Beaufort. So it's going to look very similar to this. It's going to be made very similar to this, but with some very key differences. The next type of Beaufort that you'll find is Beaufort d'été, which is a summer Beaufort. So this is Beaufort that is made only using summer's milk. A little bit less common, especially in the United States, but still fairly widely available if you know where to look for it. Last but not least is what you're enjoying tonight, Beaufort del Page. And Beaufort del Page is the absolute rarest of the Beauforts. This is because there are a lot of requirements to be a Beaufort del Page. So first of all, Beaufort del Page can only be made above a certain elevation. And so due to that, it can also only be made using summer's milk because of the elevation challenges. It is made with 100% Tarentaise cow's milk, which is a specific breed of cow known in the Savoie region for their incredibly sort of rich, sweet milk. During the summertime, they graze on alpine grasses and flowers. You can see the photo. It's like The Sound of Music, but the cheese version. Like truly, it's incredible. And that's what the cows are grazing on. And that actually is what makes the milk so sweet, which again is why it's so important that it's summer's milk. When cows switch their diet and their feed as it gets colder and they start to eat more supplemental grains and hays because, of snow or frost and whatnot, the milk loses its sweetness. And it doesn't lend itself quite as nicely to making these really large, incredible aged cheeses. So I say large, and by that I mean these cheeses are pretty massive. They're about 80-pound wheels of cheese. And so you need about 500 liters of milk just for one wheel of cheese. And what's really special is you've got this beautiful, in the photo here, if you can see it, this beautiful vessel for containing the milk to hold it before the cheeses are made. And so there's only 15 chalets in the world that are approved to make this cheese. And that kind of gives you an idea of how rare it is. And beyond that, when you think of how many liters of milk are required to make a cheese, not many wheels of this cheese are made per year. And then beyond that, another requirement of this cheese is it must be made from one single herd of cows. So you can't even ask your farmer buddy over here, hey, can I get some cow's milk? It has to be from the same herd of cows. So all of this kind of lends itself to how special and rare and unique this cheese is. Morgan is going to play a quick video. David, who you know well from these Voyage Fromage videos, has visited one of these chalets and was able to film the make process. And when you think about an 80-pound wheel of cheese, that's after the aging. That's after a lot of weight loss because as the cheese ages, you lose a lot of moisture, which is a lot of weight. So just keep that in mind while you watch this young man make this cheese.
Oh, it's so funny.
À la pluie. Et à un moment donné, tu patines dans la choucroute. Tu tires le deuxième sans les gants, Benji. Si, on va montrer quand même. On sent les bras trop. Souris, Boris, t'es filmé de dos. Tu vas te mettre de l'autre côté, il voit ta tête quand tu fais ça. Oui, que de la croupe, alors je sais pas ce qui est plus beau, je vais voir berger. Oui, je me suis chié. Au mieux, ça va passer un peu de chaud. Ce sera pour les pauvres, là. Hein? Ce sera pour les pauvres. Allez-y, vous avez le droit de tourner. Hein.
Teresa, you must tell him that he's gone viral. You could be a rock star of Instagram. No, just you must tell him he would have gone viral.
So it was kind of hard to see, but you can see that, a lot of these vats that they're using and the mechanisms that they're using are super traditional. You know, this is a cheese that is made very, very, very high elevation in the Savoie, very rural. There's not a lot out there. And so it's pretty incredible what they're doing. And they actually are required to age, for it, again, to be Beaufort d'Alpage, they have to age it in the Haute Savoie, the high Alpage of the Savoie as well. And so a very traditional characteristic of this cheese is the concave of the rind, which you don't really see with many other cheeses. There's, you know, one very well-known cheese called Tarentaise, which is named after the cow that this cheese gets its milk from. That also has the concave rind. This one is just so much bigger. You know, you're talking about a cheese that's about this tall, which when you look at Comté is about that tall. So it's, as a cheesemonger, it's very different, very, very different to cut, very different to age. It's a much fatter wheel. It's really, really interesting. And this wooden sort of ring is the mold that they use to maintain the shape of that rind. And these cheeses here are being aged in the Savoie. And we actually are able to hand select our wheels that we get. You can see this is while it was still in France, they market Formaggio. And we're lucky because we used to only be allocated one wheel a year. I visited with David and Mark, our other cheese buyers. It was last year or 2 years ago now, in the fall. And we went and we visited the affineur that ages this cheese for us. And we've since been able to get our hands on a little bit more. And so we're very happy and very lucky to be able to have this. This is a cheese that we typically would have, you know, kind of briefly during the holidays, sell out, and that was it. And so very, very happy that we were able to get an extra wheel this year, so that we could have it for Voyage Fromage and share it with people, because it's incredibly special. This is our #1 selling cheese on our website, actually. And I think it's because of its rarity, and the folks who have tasted it can't really find it many other places. And so I think that's what makes it so special and unique. And so, yeah, sharing is caring. And so that's why I really wanted to be able to bring it on board. And this is the style in which this cheese is made is quite similar to the Comté. So I'm sure you taste some similarities, that sort of richness, that alpine nuttiness. You get sort of almost like a sense of a Gruyere, but and that very smooth paste. That's the thing that I love the most is, you know, the paste is completely smooth, with no eyes. And the eyes are the little holes that you find in cheeses, like a lot of Swiss, sort of traditional, stereotypical Swiss cheese. And that's caused by gases being released within the cheese. And you don't see that in this. And that indicates, you can tell, you know, that imparts a different flavor on the cheese. And I love kind of the smoothness and richness of a cheese that's not as gassy. And that is this cheese. So yeah, I'd love to know what you think.
I really enjoyed it. It almost, the aromatics of it while you're eating it, you know, almost go up into your sinuses, which is you don't get from very many cheeses that, I mean, like a blue cheese or something you might, but I really enjoy that. Yeah.
Good. That's great. One of my, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I had a question.
Yeah.
So they obviously produce a very small amount of this cheese a year. that doesn't sustain them as a farm. Are they making other cheeses or do they do other things as well?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about these style of cheeses is that you can traditionally you had your summer cheese and your winter cheese. And so you would transition and make a different style of cheese in the winter time. And so in this region, typically you would find folks making cheeses like Reblochon or sometimes Vacherin Mont d'Or, just softer cheeses. And those are the types of cheeses that lend themselves, or that's the winter's milk where the cows are eating hays and grains and supplemental feeds, are fattier and richer, and they lend themselves nicer to those sort of softer, gooier cheeses. So that's what you end up with. And those are seasonal cheeses. Those are, similarly where you have, an Alpage cheese that's only available in the summer, Vacherin Mont d'Or has a season as well. It usually starts being available around November because the first make is usually around October, because it's a very, very young cheese. And then it exists until about the early spring and that's it. So that's kind of the natural ebb and flow of things. And so that's what you'll see the farmers doing during the winter months when they're not making this. Because the unique thing about cows as compared to sheep and especially to goats is that they will produce milk year round. So you are able to keep going. And they do. One of my sort of favorite snacks, this is an absurd snack. It's only because I worked on a cheese counter for so many years and had these incredible ingredients right in front of me. But I remember during like the throes of the holidays when I was delirious and tired and hungry, having a piece of this cheese with a really good piece of either Bresaola. Bresaola was my favorite, which is an air-cured beef, or a really good thin slice of salami and a single cornichon. And I had called it my little snack wrap, and I rolled it up in a little bundle, and that was just divine. And so a little bit of acidity with this cheese and some sort of charcuterie is just, it's the best. This is a cheese that I think, like in the wintertime especially, I like to have a single cheese plate and highlight just one cheese. And this is one that I think can really stand on its own. It's a lot of fun. So, all right. So next up, the order on these cheeses is a bit odd, I guess. I think flavor-wise, maybe this one is more appropriate first, but I really wanted to start with the Beaufort. And this cheese, depending on how you eat it, can either be milder than the Beaufort or it can be stronger than the Beaufort. And hopefully all of you got a little bit of rind with this cheese. Did you get some rind? You should have. And the big thing to notice, we're dealing with big cheeses. Smell the rind. It should smell pretty gnarly, like feet.
Ooh.
Yeah. Maybe like the bottom of a horse's foot after it like walked through some. Yep. And that is a wonderful aspect of this cheese. It's not a rind that I would eat personally. It's totally edible. You can totally eat it, but it is pungent. But then once you start tasting the cheese itself is delicate and light and bouncy and lactic. And so let me start talking about the cheese a little bit. This is Cantal Entre Deux. So Entre Deux, there are, again, 3 types of Cantal. And Entre Deux is like in the middle. So this cheese is aged anywhere from 4 to 7 months. Another massive, massive wheel of cheese. It's really hard to see in the photo, but this cheese, so the Beaufort required 500 liters of milk to produce 1 wheel. This requires 400 liters of milk. So pretty much all about an 80-pound wheel of cheese once it arrives on our doorstep. So another massive wheel of cheese. That is part of why it is so rare in the United States. So our theme tonight is sort of unique and rare cheeses, but in particular to the US. This is a cheese that is a bit more well-known and more common in France. So if you are in a grocery store in France or in a cheese shop in France, you will see Cantal. In the United States, much, much, much less common, partially because of the nature of the cheese being this large and this young and having a rind this, I would say, finicky. When you have a rind like this, that is, it's a natural rind. Does have a slight wash on it. So they are kind of brining it but they're allowing a natural rind to develop. And it's quite thick at this point because it's been allowed to grow and grow and grow. Now, a lot of cheese shops wouldn't be able to sell an 80-pound wheel of this cheese. And because of that, they would buy it from a distributor and have it in quarters or in eighths. Now, when you buy a cheese in quarters or eighths, they cryovac it in plastic. And vacuum sealing a rind like this is just death to that poor cheese and to that poor rind, because what happens is it suffocates that rind. It gets really tacky, but then the rind has nowhere to go. And the rind wants to go somewhere. And so it starts to permeate into the cheese itself. And so rather than having the essence of funk, you're getting like a lot of funk in the cheese in a way that is not what the maker intended. And so the Auvergne is a really beautiful place in France. I'm hoping to go visit next year because one of our favorite jam makers is also based very well, I say near the Auvergne, but it's like 3 hours from this cheesemaker, which if you look at a map of this area, it is so remote and there's so little there that that'll do for me. This cheese in this region has a 2,000-year-old history, which is pretty incredible. And it's actually thought that this cheese is a precursor to cheddar. What they say is that French stonemasons moved to the UK, to Somerset, and to build stone walls, and they took their cheesemaking skills with them. And so when you look at this cheese, it is not technically a cheddar because it doesn't go through the cheddaring process of stacking the curds. However, this is a pressed, uncooked cheese. And when I say uncooked, the cheese that we had just prior, the Beaufort, is a cooked cheese. And that's to expel the moisture. It's gently, even though it is a raw milk cheese, the Beaufort, but it's gently cooked to expel the water. Now, this cheese is pressed to expel the water. There are many different methods for expelling water from a cheese, whether it be salt, or brine, or pressing, or cooking. So in this case, it's pressing, and that's why you get this bouncy, like sort of springy texture almost, which is very different than the first cheese that we had. So give it a taste, and then taste it closer and closer to the rind.
It's very funky close to the rind.
Exactly. And so you can imagine that.
We ate the rind first.
And what did you think of it?
It was nasty
Before or after she told you?
before.
But you know what?
I smelled it and I'm like, oh, this smells horrible. Let's eat it.
Well, because so often you give us things where they smell weird and then you eat it and it's so good. And so he probably just assumed that's what it was.
That is true.
Did it taste like butt?
It's pretty bad. I don't think I would want to eat a sandwich of it.
I hope it didn't ruin your impression of the rest of the cheese.
No, I mean, it's the other end of the cheese. It's night and day,
Oh, it's totally different from the foot portion of the cheese to the cheese portion of the cheese. Like night and day.
Well, you know what? You never know until you try. And I guarantee you, I've tried the rinds on probably all of our cheeses. Just to give it a go. And so I'm right there with you. I've had regrets, but
Well, if you hadn't told us not to eat it, I would have done 100% the same thing. I
Yes.
just started at the other end. So, because you've gotten us so used to eating the rinds that without question,
I know. And so you can
Just
blame me for
like
now.
a big no on this one.
But I
Really?
love the fact that because the cheese is so big, you know, it kind of helps to have that big intense rind so that, you know, it's just so unique, this cheese. You know, it's so large and it's fat. It's my computer screen is not big enough. It's probably like 3 feet tall. I mean, it's huge. I can't even visually describe how I can't carry this wheel myself at all, even way back in the day when I was stubborn and carried the big wheels, just because of the awkward size of it. I'd say the shape is more similar to that of a Parmesan.
So how tall or how big around is it then?
It's not as big around as like a Comté, so probably I'm
Like 30 inches almost? Yeah.
maybe 24, 30 inches. Yeah.
They don't look that big in the picture.
I know the picture really does. I need to get, I'll start when I go to visit these places, I'll start taking photos with me to scale so you can get a better sense of how big these wheels are. And we do have them, you know, if you're ever in Cambridge, obviously you have to ask, you know, either for me or Mark or Morgan or David or any of the cheesemongers to take you down to the cave, because we have a lot of these big wheels in the cave. A wheel like this, we usually only get one at a time. So we do tend to break it open pretty quickly. But right now we have a whole wheel of Beaufort in the cave. And we always have lots and lots of Comté in the cave. So it's a fun place and we just redid our caves, which is very exciting.
It's finished now then.
It is finished. I am
Congratulations.
happy.
That's exciting.
The cheeses are so happy. We've had several cheesemakers come and visit us since, and they've all given the seal of approval. And it's
I've
just
seen that on your Instagram account.
Oh yeah, I think Morgan, you posted that at some point. Because it's just it's going to be a much more sustainable, gentle way to age the cheeses as opposed to what we were doing before, which was still a nice way to age the cheeses. But we're really honing in on it. And that's the thing. It's like, I'm sure in 20 years, we're going to say, what were we thinking? We should have done it this way. And that's kind of what I love about cheese and food in general, is it's just a never ending learning process. But it is very helpful that my husband's an engineer, so he could engineer the entire cave. But very happy that that's behind us and built, and the cheeses are thriving. So,
Julia,
yes.
the question, I'm sorry, I'm not looking good enough to put the camera on. So you said that these were stonemasons that went to Somerset. So I've been to Somerset. Is there a cheese there that's similar to this?
Yes. So this is what they call this the precursor to cheddar, to UK cheddars. And there's other cheeses in that area. There's a lot of British territorial cheeses. And you've, learned about some of them, some of the previous classes that have that sort of, I call it sort of light lactic quality to it, like Lancashire, like Kirkham's Lancashire is definitely one that really has that curdy, I call it a curdy texture, because you can actually kind of see the curds almost. And when you break it apart, it doesn't break in a straight line. It breaks and you see the like little jagged curves of all the curds. And so, so that's the history of cheddar. And so this has its own history, obviously, before cheddar, but that's where they think the inspiration for cheddar came from, is this cheese here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions? We ready to move on to the next cheese? Okay, so the next cheese is Vache Bern, and this is another cheese that's exclusive to Formaggio Kitchen in the US. Now, Vache Bern, we are in France still. We've hit a lot of different regions of France, actually. We started out in the Savoie, then we went to the Auvergne, and now we are in the Pyrenees. And so when you get to the sort of Basque Pyrenees area, you see a lot of sheep's milk. And so this is unusual in and of itself that it is cow's milk. And so this is a raw milk cheese. And it's a blend of two different cows, Montbéliards and Pinot Noirs. And it's only aged about 2 months old. And this is done in the same sort of method as the famous sheep's milk cheeses of this region, which are much more common. So this is aged for us by Etienne. So Etienne is the son of Marie-Josée at Bergère du Haut-Bern. And so Marie-Josée is who we started our relationship with many, many, many years ago. And she retired a few years ago and her son took over. So now we work with her son, Etienne. And he upholds a very traditional way of aging cheeses that's very traditional to that region, which is the Dean system, where they are collecting the wheels from the cheesemakers, which are the herdsmen of either the sheep, the cow, or the goats, because they do actually mostly age sheep's milk cheeses, but they do have some goat, some cow, and some mixed milks. And so in this case, they collect the cheese from the cow's milk producer after the farmer has made it, and then they age it for them. And so say they collect 10 wheels of cheese, they age those wheels and they give back 8 wheels to the farmer. And so they keep the 2 wheels as payment for the affinage or the aging of the cheeses. The farmer sells it at farmers markets, locally for hikers who are hiking the Pyrenees, things like that. And then the affineur is usually more set up for distributing typically to Paris. In our case, we worked very hard in the Pyrenees to develop relationships so that we could have some of these cheeses exported to the US. And you were seeing a little bit more Basque cheeses, sort of from small affineurs in the Pyrenees, in the US, and it's growing in popularity. But it is one of our biggest sections on our cheese wall, so we're very, very proud of it. And this being the cow's milk cheese, this is aged, like I said, only about 2 months. Much, much smaller than the wheels that you had before. So you're talking about a 9-pound wheel versus an 80-pound wheel. So that it makes sense contextually why this is a 2-month-old cheese and it feels and tastes much more aged than the previous cheese, which is 4 to 7 months old. Probably by this point, it's about, 6 months. My favorite thing about this cheese, though, is the smell. It, for some reason, reminds me exactly of the smell of fondue when you just finish making, when you just get it to the perfect point and the aroma is intense. That's what this cheese reminds me of. Much denser in flavor. It also has a natural rind. The rind is totally edible. It doesn't taste like feet, I promise. The Pyrenees are known for their delicate rinds, and you can see the difference in how thin it is. And that is how they care for the rinds and how they clean the cheeses, because they don't want a lot of mold to develop on the rind, because they want to keep the interior of the cheese dense and clean. And if you allow, too much mold growth on the outside, it does impart, more of a pungency, earthiness, funkiness to the interior of the cheese. So what do y'all think of that one?
Yum.
The rind is really nutty.
Yes. This cheese, I feel like,
The cheese is really nutty too.
Really
It's
nutty.
overall, yeah.
But the rind almost tasted like you were eating nuts. When I first tasted the rind.
yeah,
And the rind is much milder than the cheese itself.
totally. I mean, the rind is it's really fun to look in our cave and to see the Pyrenees cheeses, because the rinds are so distinct, and they're actually very challenging to keep happy because they're so thin. And if you do not get the humidity just right, then they want to crack or peel. So they're very, very finicky. But and then if, they peel, then the cheese dries out. So it's really, really nice. It's a true art form, I think, to create the thinnest rind that's just a barrier of protection for the cheese. It doesn't impart a ton of flavor or pungency, but it really serves a unique purpose by just the nature of it being so delicate and thin. It's very cool. And this regionally is perfect with this. They're from the same region. I'm sure they're just like, should be a perfect pairing. All right. So the last cheese of the night is going to be Masterazio. And so we've never had this cheese before in Voyage Fromage. But we have seen the producer before. So this is the producer Casa Medaio. And this is a very unusual cheese that is, again, not commonly found in the States. And it's a fairly small format cheese that is aged quite a long time. So this cheese is aged 12 to 18 months. And so you're talking about a wheel that's about this round, and it's about a little bit taller, but it's not a very big wheel. It's another wheel that's probably about 8 to 10 pounds, a whole wheel. And you can see on this one how the rind as well is quite thin. And what they're doing is, and the cheese itself is very, very, very dense. So we've had only cow's milk so far. This cheese is sheep's milk. What makes this cheese so unusual as well is it is from Campania, but the sheep are from Sardinia. And so it is a Sardinian family that moved to Campania 2 generations ago. And Sardinia is known for their sheep and for their sheep's milk and for their sheep's milk cheeses. And so while they were able to part with the land of Sardinia, they were not able to part with the sheep. And so they brought the breed of sheep that are known in Sardinia to Campania to make these cheeses. And that is why they are so special and so unique. The cleanliness of the cheese, of the rind, you get that from salt and olive oil. And you can rub, salt is the key factor that really helps inhibit mold growth, especially a coarse salt. You can use that as the cheese ages, especially once the rind is fully developed. You can use salt to clean a cheese very, very effectively, because not only will you leave residual salt on the rind, which inhibits the mold, but it's an abrasive. And so it will actually kind of act as a scrubber, essentially, for the outside of the cheese. And then the oil is the same. The oil is an oxygen barrier that helps inhibit the mold growth. So these are things that will help keep a cheese cleaner in flavor. All these are very intentional. And this in the photo, you can see where these cheeses are aged. And so you have everything from hanging sort of provolones to your wheels of cheese at the bottom, and their cellars are kind of numerous chambers. And it used to be different sort of family homes, and each chamber is connected by a little doorway, and you could exchange cheeses and trade with sort of your neighbors way back in the day. At least that's the story that was told to me, which I love, and I think that I want it to be true. So I love, that we were joking, David and I, today about sort of cheese and cheese history. And when you think about the people who make cheese, they are overworked, passionate creatures. If you've met and talked to a cheesemaker, they are pouring their life and energy into cheese. And so while they may have meticulous diaries for the makes of their cheeses, I've always talked about how fascinated I am by a cheesemaker's journal of, what was blossoming when the cows were grazing during this make cycle. What was the weather like? What was the humidity like? People really do go into that detail. But when you're talking about historical records of cheese making and cheese making techniques, because it was sort of a peasant's familial profession, it wasn't something that was widely recorded. And so a lot of this is, oral history where, you're passing, you think that this cheese, has a history of 2,000 years, or we think this is how cheese was originally founded. So I think that there's so much digging in that we could do into the world of cheese to find sort of these historical points that altered cheese making and what influenced people's decisions in their cheese making. And yeah, we just haven't even scratched the surface, because so much of this is unverified. There's stories that cheesemongers tell each other that we've all learned since we first started the industry. And but when you look at historical texts, there's really the most of the main cheese texts that were published, in a really thoughtful way were from like the 80s. And you don't see a ton too much earlier than that. So that's just another fascination of mine to dig into a little bit in my spare time. Just because it's, I love the stories of why cheeses are made the way that they're made, and how they're developed and how they're passed on, and how that history is shared from family to family. And, a lot of the cheese, and I think it sort of was really kind of brought to the front of my mind recently, because I went to London a couple weeks ago to, there was a big sort of open house at Neal's Yard Dairy, and all the cheesemakers that we work with from the UK were visiting, and which is so rare to get that many cheesemakers in London at the same time. And so I flew out so that I could visit with a lot of them. And so many of them are near retirement. So many of them. And so many of them have no idea what's next and who will take on their recipes. And that's just like, my head was just going to explode, because these are some of the cheeses that I find to be the most incredible special cheeses that I've learned and loved for 18 years, and so to have a hint that they could disappear, it just is wild. And maybe that's the nature of things. You enjoy it while it's here, and then it's gone. But
That's so sad.
it really is. And I think that, it's on all of us to appreciate these cheesemakers and show them their value. And it's interesting, because there's so many, I won't mention which cheesemaker because I think it might embarrass her, but she doesn't realize that she is an icon in the US for the cheese that she makes. Her cheese, like, people just bow down to her and think she is a goddess in the cheese making world. And she has no idea, because she is just in the make room every day, churning out cheese after cheese and just pouring everything into that. And so she doesn't even see it. And she's a complete celebrity in the cheese world. And I know it would make her completely blush if she found out that, you know, all our cheesemongers just think her cheeses are unreal. But yeah, it's something that, you know, I think a lot of them realized that they have to start thinking about the next generation and how to pass it on. And the funny thing is a lot of them did ask me. They said, you know, how did Isan pass the business on to you? You know, you were part of it. And then, you know, and it's basically the same concept of, you know, carrying the mantle and passing it on versus letting something like that fall to nothing. And so I think they're all trying to figure it out now, which is good because they have time. You know, they're in their early 60s. So I think that's still young spring chicken mode. So they've got time to figure it out. And I think that it's on us, though, to express to them how important the work is that they do, and that it deserves being saved and maintained and carried on. So
I think that produce and fruit are designed to be enjoyed in the moment, not cheese. Cheese is traditional. There's heritage. There's just, you know, remember Daphne Zappo? She said one time is that when you eat cheese, you are eating generations of people because they made it with their hands. And so the DNA continues to move through generations of people. So no, we enjoy cherries in season. Cheese should be around for centuries.
yeah, I agree. And I think we just have to, it's going to take a village to be able to carry these traditions on and make sure that we can protect them and honor them. And because, you know, the cheesemakers will have to retire eventually. So how do we make sure that we sustain it? So that'll be on us. That'll be our homework, to be able to, you know, create a new generation of passionate cheesemakers who feel supported, not only by, you know, the industry, but sort of the bigger community and beyond. So that'll be on us. So any other questions? We ended on such a deep, heavy note. That wasn't the intent, but y'all really bring it out. So, but I guess if that's everything, then thank you so much for joining us. Next,
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate it. Next month, we're going to do some wild cheeses. It's going to be really cool. We're going to focus on rinds next month, and we're
cool.
really going to dig into, I swear we're not going to do a repeat of it will all be edible. But no, we're going to really hone in on rinds and how each of them are formed and sort of how they impart flavor on the cheese and what their purposes are. And yeah, a couple of the cheeses that we have are very rare, and we had to time it we're importing them from Switzerland. And so the timing is very challenging, but they got on the water on time. So they will be here in time for the class. So I say now, if the FDA doesn't hold them, then we'll be good. So no, it'll be a fun lesson. And then the next month in August, we are going to have a special guest who is going to, Giuseppe is going to be our special guest. And it's all, get your summer tomatoes out, get them ready, because it's all going to be mozzarella and mozzarella themed.
Ooh.
And he is our Italian mozzarella cheesemaker, and he is going to dig into all the beautiful cheeses, and you're going to get more than 4 that month, just because he does a lot of different styles. So we're just gonna,
That'll be fun.
it'll be fun. It's gonna be a really good one. So thank you so much, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
we'll see you next month.